Good morning, Fight World. It's your boy, Jack Slack, the first analyst nominated for Journalist of the Year at the World MMA Awards, and this year the only analyst not nominated for the new Analyst of the Year at the MMA Awards. It's Sunday morning here in the UK, and we're hot off the heels of perhaps the worst UFC pay-per-view ever. I say perhaps because I was not a fan at all of UFC 190, I believe. The one that was all Brazilian old men, and then Bitch Correa versus Ronda Rousey in the main event. But that was bought by like 1 million plus people, so don't take my word for it. I'm just an elitist in that regard. But this one really was. You were looking down the card and you're going, who are they selling this to? None of these people has appeal outside of MMA, and everyone on this card, or at least every matchup on this card, to MMA aficionados is going to be like, huh. But we got through them, and the night of... Do you remember when people used to be like, well, you know, the cards without the name power, they often turn out to be the best ones because the fighters really bring it to make up for the lack of name power, or some shit like that. Dana White used to say it all the time, and people actually used to repeat it, and you'd be like, what? No, there's no correlation. It's just... they're unrelated whether the fight is good or whether the people have name power. It's just... Before the fight, the only thing that can sell it is the name power or the quality of the fighters and the interesting factors of the matchup. This fight had almost none of that, and no name power. So I don't know. People ask me why they were doing this, but you know why they're doing this. They got $100 million of interest alone to pay on the loan each year that they took out to buy the UFC. So they really have to make the most of everything they have. Problem is, they put all their... Well, even before the... WME IMG buyout, they'd put all their eggs in the Ronda Rousey and Conor McGregor basket. Ronda Rousey didn't fight for a year, then came back and looked awful. Conor McGregor is now like the only major star that the UFC have, and he can basically dictate whatever he wants to do. And even though Conor McGregor fights like every few months, you can't fill 12, 13 pay-per-views a year with Conor McGregor. And so rather than a crowd pleaser, we got this one that had a belt slapped on it to make it look like we should care. And it turned into just the worst main event in recent pay-per-view history. I'm not going to say the worst main event ever because, you know, Frank Mir versus Mirko Cro Cop still happened. Anywho, we'll get right into it. We'll go straight into the main event because it was awful. Holly Holm versus Germain de Randamie. Germain de Randamie troubled Holly Holm in exactly the same way that Valentina Shevchenko did for the opening round. She moved straight back every time Holly Holm walked in. And Holly Holm ran forward, pumping her fists in the Carlos Condit running combinations and going, ya, 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 each time she punched. Karate, karate, karate. And every time Germain de Randamie gave ground and tried to counter with the right hand. And for the opening 2 rounds, that was the story of it. And what you have here is an example of a fighter failing to reverse engineer what they already know. You know, Holly Holm, watch her against Ronda Rousey, she backs up 1 step, she immediately breaks the line with the 2nd step. She knows why she does that, because if she keeps going straight backwards, she'll hit the fence. Germain de Randamie did occasionally break the line of attack, but often just backed straight up and waited for Holm to come onto her. In either case, you know, Holly Holm should know exactly what she needs to do there. She needs to feint and follow in after the feints. She threw like 2 feints around, feinted the sidekick. Sidekick, brilliant technique for feinting, by the way. If you watch any point fighting, any taekwondo, well, the whole of taekwondo is done, Olympic taekwondo anyway, is done behind what's called the cut kick, which is basically like a half-extended sidekick that you bring up and sort of hop in behind, and then if they drop their hands too low at any point, well, I say drop their hands, it's taekwondo. If they drop their mental guard at any point, you could just flick it up into their face in a hook kick or a round kick. But that's how they advance in taekwondo. So feinting the lead leg sidekick is a terrific way to get in. But Holm would feint it and then stop. Like that was, oh, got you with the feint. Just like that feint served no purpose at all because you're going to go right back into running in with combinations. And you didn't follow up on it in any way. And, you know, you haven't taken her finger off the trigger in any way. So that was the first 2 rounds. I think it was round 2 and round 3 that... de Randamie landed her most successful blows at the end of the round, basically. Afterwards, they asked her why she did it, and I would have respected her much more if she said, because that's when she dropped her hands. But, oh, it's just awful. And, you know, there's a lot of... It's exactly like when Mayweather sucker punched Victor Ortiz. And that was a sucker punch. I mean, don't even pretend for a moment it wasn't, because he acts like he is going to hug the guy and then decks him. And everyone after that was like, oh, protect yourself at all times. And yeah, I mean, there's a degree of that. You know, Dan Hardy was saying this on Twitter, protect yourself at all times. It's the job of the fighter. And fighters do not hear the bell, especially if it's a raucous crowd, which it wasn't. No one gave a shit. But, you know, you could understand, like, the Aldo thing when people going mental because that first round was incredible. And he went after the bell and hit Chad Mendes. Maybe he didn't hear the bell. It didn't happen again in the next round, I don't think, or anything after that. But it's the referee's job to be in the way. And failing that, it's the referee's job to do something about it. After the second time she continued after the round, he was like, I'll take a point next time. Which means if this was a 3-round fight, she could have just gotten away, well, she might have gotten away with it all 3 times. But she could have done that and, well, actually, no, it wouldn't have had any effect because there's no point hitting someone after the 3rd round of the 3-round fight. So she literally would have just got away with it every time she wanted to if it was a 3-round fight. Jesus Christ. So, shit ref, shit commission, shit fight. There was one really cool moment, which was Holly Holm's Brazilian kick off the lead leg. Very Glaub Feitosa-esque. Really nice. Just came up over the lead shoulder, caught de Randamie in the head. She landed another counter left at one point, and de Randamie landed some nice counter rights. But there was nothing really of note in this fight. The only real thing to say was that the tone of the fight changed once de Randamie started coming forwards. When she stopped giving ground sprightly after about the 2nd round, she was a lot more hittable, and Holm could actually catch her with the low kicks and the running combinations and stuff. But if she'd stuck to the Shevchenko game plan the whole way through, I think you'd have seen another one where Holly Holm looked absolutely hopeless and just threw her air. Good on Holm for trying to get takedowns and doing something to change up what was going on, but what she really needed to be told was, you need to feint this girl back and then attack her. Or at least then trade with her. You know, because in a trade of punches, you would hope the girl with the tons of boxing experience would be able to slip in some nice counters, especially that left hand. So feint her back and try and get in when she tries to counter, you know, would be the ideal plan. What you also saw was a nice little use of de Randamie from de Randamie of really nice little tie clinch technique. I think I learnt this one from a video posted by Sylvie, Douglas Itu, was she a 100-pound Muay Thai fighter? Yeah, she's out in Thailand doing, I think she's trying to get 200 fights or something like that. But she has a great blog, and she puts up tons of videos of like private lessons with really good, top quality Thai coaches. And one of them was demonstrating this clinch where it was basically he put his hands behind his opponent's head, not like a double collar tie, but like the wrist bones across each other. Then he worked his head underneath the opponent's chin, and he pushed his arms out straight. Well, like you would if you've ever done a TP submission on the ground. It's a triangle where you lock your legs legs at the ankles and you squeeze by pushing your legs straight. Except it's done with the arms. So your head's under their chin and you're stretching your arms straight, so it's squeezing in on the sides of their head and pinning them in position. And you try and dig in knees to the body. And de Randamie has good knees to the body. Really interesting little technique. Cool to see her using. Don't know the name of it. If I've got any Nak Muay elitists in the comments, give me the name of that technique, because I love that clinch. Because it's a principle from infighting and boxing as well. Keep your head below theirs and open up their body by standing them upright. But with the hands as well, it locks them in position, and then you can use your knees straight to the midsection. So de Randamie won the fight, but you know, if they'd taken a point at any point in that fight for those 2 infractions, it would have been a 47-47 draw, which we all would have hated because they'd do a rematch. Tons of boos, some guys shouting "fuck you" during the interviews. Just an awful fight, and really not promising for the future of the division. You know. Especially as both of them came in significantly under the weight limit. You know, anything like up over a pound is a lot to come in at underweight. When you know, every other division, everyone's just scraping out every ounce of water in them. And de Randamie came in like a pound and a half underweight. And then they had Cyborg sitting at ringside. It would have been nice to, I didn't see if they did this on the broadcast, but it would have been nice if they got her in the ring to stand opposite the winner, because it would have been interesting to see how huge she is next to them. And then the rest of the card, Silva versus Brunson. This one's controversial. I don't know how we can all be upset about a decision when so little happened in the fight. There were moments of classic Silva, and I think it really helped that Brunson is such a skittish, awkward striker. You know, he didn't seem... Again, I'm going to talk about feints, but he didn't seem to know how to throw a feint. He stood on the outside awkwardly, and then he'd leap in with a jab, and Silva would crack him with a right hook or something like that. Really nice use of the Jinga, or Ginga, however it's said. The capoeira bouncing from one foot to the other, getting in rhythm. It sort of worked. It didn't look very pretty, but it worked. Silva went from the Jinga into a spin, like a taekwondo back kick fake, and then into a high kick to the head with his left foot. Really cool. Bit awkward, but cool nonetheless. Silva, where he let himself down was in trying to take the double collar tie. You know, he used to be so effective from there, and it seems like these stronger wrestlers, when they get caught in that double collar tie, if they just start swinging, his head starts to move away from theirs. You know, because you want to keep it clamped close to theirs so that they can't hit you. But he seems to start moving away from them as they start swinging, and then get caught with punches. And that's obviously how he got dropped surprisingly by Weidman in the second fight. And he was eating a lot of clean blows from that position in this one. Brunson looked awkward as hell. His striking makes me cry. And then he was diving after shots from halfway across the octagon. So there were some nice sprawls from Anderson, which is a fairly rare thing to see. But equally, they were the most telegraphed shots you've ever seen. And the controversy is over whether you weigh the takedowns higher than the very minimal striking. The way that judging is technically supposed to be done in the rules is if the majority of the round happens on the feet, you give greater weight to what happened there than what happened on the ground, and vice versa. Except if the majority of the round is on the feet and nothing happens on the feet, do you give weight to the very few things that happened there over anything that happened on the ground? Or, you know, it gets very complicated, which is why you can understand even if you followed the judging criteria to the letter, you could come out with completely different results. And nothing did happen on the ground. It was classic. Get Anderson Silva down. He stalls. You stall. Everybody stall. Not a great fight. Moments of Anderson being Anderson again, which was nice. And, you know, he looked competitive with a highly regarded middleweight prospect. It's so weird, though, thinking back to Brunson wrestling around Yoel Romero. You know, that's no small feat. And now he just looks really awkward. He's got all the tools, but I don't know where he's training, so this is no rub on his coaches, but I think he needs to go somewhere where he'll get beat up if he makes those kind of mistakes every day in the gym. Like that, and the running forward behind his chin and all that sort of stuff. But again, another bad fight. Moving on. Jacko versus Timbo, the only finish on the card. It was a gimme fight because Jacko was putting up fake Craigslist adverts looking for opponents because they weren't putting him in any fights, and he's probably due a title shot. Yeah, nice, got him down. Boich looked way smaller than Jacko. You know, you were looking at one gigantic athlete and one sort of, you know, small middleweight who'll give it a go with anyone, but isn't like a super athlete. Jacko's shots were coming from wide out in the open, didn't look particularly well set up. He was just diving after them, but it still got him down. Attempted his usual arm triangle from side control, you know, head under the far elbow, drive it up, and went straight to mount with it. Couldn't finish the choke, so he just went straight to mount. And then the finish came by Kimura, which was pretty cool. You really don't see too many of those in the UFC, like finishes at a high level. You see it all the time being threatened, you know, against back body locks and to advance position, but you don't often see him finished. I mean, Damian Maia will threaten one in like every fight because he goes to that reverse half position all the time, and then he'll move to the mount instead or do something different. It's the same with Marcelo Garcia, actually. Marcelo Garcia has like publicly stated he doesn't like using the Kimura. He thinks it's a strength move. But if you watch him going from half guard, he'll reverse his hips into the reverse half guard, and if the opponent like puts their hand in front of his head trying to stop him from pushing through and passing, he'll grab it like he's going to do a Kimura, push their hand to the mat, and then put his elbow inside and start wriggling his arm up into like an octopus guard position from the top and then pass, or go to the back. Very cool, but interesting that he's given these opportunities to Kimura and he just passes them up. It can be a tricky one to finish. Mind you, Jacko finished Marcelo with a Kimura from inside closed guard, which might have started Marcelo's belief that it's a strength move because Jacko is about 50 pounds bigger than him. And then the one that people were calling fight of the night was Dustin Poirier versus Jim Miller. I think it really only stood out because of the how bad the rest of the fights last night were. But it was a good fight. Poirier working his punches over. Jim Miller comes back, starts low kicking him. They were talking about maybe he broke Poirier's leg or fractured it at some point. But a good fight. Bit weird. Daniel Cormier on commentary keeps going on about how Dustin Poirier throws everything perfectly straight and never loops his punches. I'm going, are we watching the same Dustin Poirier? Not the one that swings wide all the time and often gets clipped on the chin while he's doing so by guys as shoddy on the feet as Akira Kurosani. But no, apparently we were. But that was our the new 3-man commentary team. I liked it. I like that they're doing that. Lots of people. Can we just I mean, I didn't weigh in on this, but I've wanted Mike Goldberg gone for years. Not out of any dislike for him. I really like him as a person, but put him on promo position or something. Have him do that bit before fights where he goes, Mike so-and-so is a something from somewhere. Now he's a carrot. No, the bit where he introduces them and they run at the camera and there's that great gif of Cody McKenzie going, shit just got real. But have him do those bits. Just don't have him commentate the fights. Or have him come in halfway through, in a, what's his name? Howard Letterman? The guy who does the scorecards and goes, okay, Jim. Have him come in that position. But what you do is you go, and we're going over to Mike for some adverts now. And he goes, okay, Joe. And then he goes, corn nuts, corn to the core. Because you don't need him there the whole fight. He's useless. He's been doing this 20 years, and he seems to know less now than he did when he started. And he's teasing this new project. I think it's going to be a Joe Rogan appearance, as opposed to working for Bellator. But Bellator were teasing getting him, and everyone was like, oh my god, yes, I need Goldie in my life. And it really, you don't need him. It's more a security blanket thing. I like the familiar sounds. He doesn't add anything to the broadcast. Oh. And again, that's not because I might hate Mike Goldberg. It's because there are so many guys who can do his job far better than him. But the UFC seems to have decided to go after the guy from Glory, who I thought for a very long time, just watching the fights, not watching the intros and stuff, I thought he was Ron Kruk. And I used to tweet, why have they let Ron Kruk do commentary? But no, apparently it was Todd Thingy. The UFC should be throwing money at Mauro. That's what they should be doing. Or stealing Jimmy Smith or someone like that. But, yeah. But I liked Anik and Rogan and Cormier. And people were like, oh, they were awkwardly talking over each other. And you're like, well, the other guys had 20 years of chemistry. Give them time to build it up. At any rate, yeah, Poirier versus Miller was decent. Is that the whole main card we've done there? Oh, no, Glover Teixeira versus Jared Cannellini. Cannelloni. Yeah, I watched that one on fast forward, and it was exactly the same every round. Come out, fall on the takedown, sit in half guard, and drop very, very short elbows ineffectively. Yeah. Oh, and then I watched Wilson Hayes' fight on the undercard against a really, really tall flyweight, the biggest flyweight I've ever seen. Wait, why is he Yuta Sasaki on here, and he was Ulka Sasaki in the fight? Oh well, it's gonna be like what's his name, Henry Briones. His name's different in every place you look. But yeah, I mean, Wilson Hayes was getting tagged up on the feet early on, but then he started to mix in the takedowns and do level changes coming up and down, running in with Superman punches and stuff like that. Nothing too interesting, just some nice grappling from Wilson Hayes. He was in closed guard for a while, and I was like, please do the Wilson pass, which is the Tozy pass, but with the back step. If you haven't seen him do that, go look it up, because he's absolutely amazing. I mean, they called it the Wilson pass because he's so good at it. But basically, you're using an underhook from guard. Obviously, dangerous to begin with, because omoplatas, triangles, stuff like that open up when you put a hand on the mat. But you're using an underhook from guard, jamming your head under theirs, and you're backstepping and using your hips to unlock their ankles, and you're holding one of their legs and trying to step over it. And then you go into half guard and start smashing forward like GSP. But he did that loads in Bellator, and it was really fun to watch. And if you've never seen his grappling match with Ryan Hall, that's a really entertaining one. Right, sod all else interesting to talk about from that card. Genuinely one of the worst I've ever seen on pay-per-view. And I think the UFC is going to be hurt by it a lot. Between this and we've definitely got a main event for London, guys. Buy the tickets and then we'll tell you what the main event is. Oh, the main event's actually what we advertised as the co-main event. Yeah, I think between this and that, they've probably lost some goodwill with fans. But it's going to be hard to like completely alienate the fans with just those two. What will happen is they'll use Germain de Randamie's title as like a bolster for another event. They'll put on like a Michael Bisping title defense, and then they'll say, but you're also getting the women's featherweight title. And people will go, oh my god, 2 title fights. Like, that's better than if they gave you like the middleweight title and top contenders fight at welterweight or something like that instead. It's the belts. They look good on the posters, and they add like 10,000 buys to whatever you're selling. Anyway, let's do. We'll go to the questions thread on Facebook this week. More emails next week. I did a cheeky extra episode to answer some of the emails last week that I didn't get around to in the first podcast last week. Amani says, missed the whole event. What should I look to see? And I said in the replies, you'll enjoy fucking nothing. It was just dreck. There was with the exception of that one Brazilian kick and Jacko grappling on a guy who he probably shouldn't have been fighting, very little to enjoy from it. Seren says, what should be done in the event of significant strikes after the bell? I think you've got to dock a point, because this isn't an issue of intentional or not. If you land a significant strike after the bell, you have committed a foul. Like the intentional thing shouldn't be a big deal. Like, it annoys the fuck out of me when people are like, oh, unintentional groin strike or unintentional eye poke. And you're like, well, no, you still fouled them. And you get 5 minutes to recover with that. You get smashed in the head with a punch or an elbow after the bell. You get 1 minute to recover. Yeah, they need to do something about it. It doesn't happen often, but every time they get away with it. What would your perfect UFC commentators lineup be? Rogan and Mauro. Easily. Yep. I mean, because Mauro is a guy who can do all that stuff about the advertising and all the stuff that needs to be said on the broadcast in that position. But he's amazing. He can dip into things like boxing, WWE, whatever, and he'll call all the moves. He'll know what's going on. The guy is really with it, and he throws himself fully into whatever he's doing. Whereas, Goldberg has been covering the one thing for 20 years and got no better at recognizing what's going on. That's not to besmirch any of the other guys that the UFC has on brand. I mean, I like Stan a lot. I like Cormier. I like Dominic Cruz. He had a bit of a problem where he was like, he'd been waiting years to get in that spot, and he just kept going. He wouldn't stop talking. I like John Gooden a lot. Dan Hardy's good. I mean, I like Bas Rutten, but if you've heard the WSOF stuff he used to do more recently, kind of phoned it in a bit. And equally with Bas Rutten, what you're gonna get is like stories about his pancrase days. He's gonna, anytime someone goes for a leg lock, he'll go, "Oh, yep, I once reverse heel hooked a guy from here and broke his shin." Proceed into Yoshiki Takahashi's story. And back in the day, it used to be hilarious because if anyone ever got in a clinch, Bas Rutten would go, "Oh, he should roll for a knee bar right now." He had such a leg lock centric style, and it really came through in his commentary. But I love Bas; he's incredible. So he's just not really top tier commentator anymore. Wouldn't be in my top 2 pairing at any rate. I love the voice, Michael Chavello. He's always good. I much prefer him in kickboxing than in MMA because he's been in the kickboxing scene so long and he knows almost everyone there. Yeah, I mean, there's tons of good guys, but Mauro and Rogan would be my favourite. Maybe throw in Randy Couture for some technical stuff. He was always enjoyable. Lucas says, so should the UFC make Anderson versus McGregor now that Anderson has won a fight? Oh, God. He'll probably call for it. Lex says, so how many was this pay-per-view supposed to sell according to the hype men? And how big was this discrepancy between that figure and the figure we all knew it would sell? I reckon this sells about as well as Will Ospreay, to be honest. Pro wrestling joke for the insiders there. No, I don't expect this to have done well. Because you've got... When you don't have star power, you have that group of, hardcore fight fans who will buy fights for the fights. But even they weren't impressed by this, because anyone who knew what they were talking about knew that this main event was a bit of a farce. I mean, good fighters, but like the belt was made up, and it was basically an undercard fight put on a main event of a pay-per-view, no less. And then there was a load of decent fighters matched against fighters who were much below them, and there wasn't a single upset on in that regard. Michael says, have there been any freak fights for worth of technical study? You can't. I mean, there's some really good smaller versus larger guy fights, like if you go grappling, Tonin versus Pelhares is an incredible fight. Tonnen lets Palhares put him on his back, and then Palhares will sit back in the butterfly guard, and he doesn't really pass very effectively. So Tonnen will like reach over his back with the old judo lat grip, and he'll stand up like a technical stand up into a nice wide stance, and knowing Palhares will immediately grab a leg and start trying to pick him up and dunk him again, and then he'll jump in on like a leg scissor takedown or roll under for a knee bar. He does it a lot now actually, but that was sort of the first time I'd seen him using it that much. So he'd go to his back and then he'd stand up, and the guy would immediately grab onto the leg without any thought that he would have put in on the feet. Like if he'd gone for the takedown, he'd be going, well, I should be careful about this stuff. But for some reason, if you stand up from the floor, the other guy will go, quick, bundle him down and forget about all the stuff that he's supposed to be doing. And you can see that in another giant versus midget grappling match, Leo Vieira versus Mark Kerr, way back in the day. Mark Kerr said it was like grappling with water. Things like Benson Henderson versus Brandon Thatch, where you put the pace on them and then technique wins out eventually. I know everyone wants me to mention Manoa Man, so I'm going to mention my favourite Manoa Man moment, which is against Giant Silva. Giant Silva's like 7 foot something, and Manoa is, he could probably cut to welterweight, maybe middleweight. But he comes out and he's bouncing back and forward and not getting close enough to Giant Silva that Giant Silva can hit him. And then he does a forward roll and comes up on a takedown. It's absolutely gorgeous. Go look it up. It's tremendous. Omari says, hey, Triple OG Jack, who are some of your favourite southpaws with a great jab? Oh, Pernell Whitaker, right off the bat. Pernell Whitaker. And Lomachenko, obviously. Brilliant jab. And who is your favourite guard player in MMA and grappling? MMA, probably Aoki, because it's so much more interesting when you allow kicks on the ground. Because Aoki has to contend with that, and he actually will butt scoot with soccer kicks. Guys were going on about how Ryan Hall, I'd like to see him try that with soccer kicks and stomps. And you're like, Imanari and Shinya Aoki have been doing that for years with soccer kicks and stomps. So, it's sort of a moot point. Aoki's knockouts have come from poorly set up takedowns. He eats knees on the way in. It very rarely gets caught on the ground with kicks or knees or anything like that. His fight with JZ Calvan, he gets caught early, like trying to heel hook Calzan, and Calzan starts dropping axe kicks on his head. But the rest of that fight is all Aoki, all guard clinic. Like he'll jump for guard and pull him down into close guard from the feet. He's using De La Riva, and with his free leg, he's kicking Calzan in the face. And that's what I love about allowing kicks on the ground. Not so much to kick the guy who's down, but the guard player gets so many more options if he can kick up at the guy. In BJJ, I'm going to say, it might be a bit of a boring choice, but I'm going to say Keenan Cornelius. Love that guy. Mainly because he seems like just a massive nerd. I love that about him. He had this grappling match with Kevin Casey at Metamoris, and Kevin Casey immediately went on social media afterwards and was like, these guys who butt scoot and don't know how to take down don't know real Gracie Jiu-Jitsu for self-defense and blah, blah, blah. And Keenan didn't even bring up that he submitted Kevin Casey with a heel hook moments after tripping him. He didn't pull guard on him. But Keenan just says, don't mind me, I'll be butt scooting in the corner. He doesn't seem to care what anyone else thinks, or, everyone's always like, you should try MMA, blah, blah, blah. And he's just like, no, quite happy playing this game with rules and being very good at it. And he created all the worm guard stuff that you see played now, and did a lot of innovation with the lapel. But the way I really like that he plays his guard is in no-gi. He does a lot of knees up to the chest stuff and encourages the other guy to come to him, which lets him get the grips in the gi. Like as soon as the guy's hands go to his legs, he gets grips and goes for spider guard. But in no-gi, he gets criticized a lot for being like a guard player and a butt scooter and stuff like that. But if you watch him ADCC no-gi, he'll let the guy come in and step in on him and go. He'll start working his De La Riva or something like that. But he'll almost immediately come up on single legs if the guy seems like for an instant to stop doing anything. He's a decent wrestler and is very underrated. And he's one of those guys who does really well coming up on his wrestling, wrestling from his back. And then the other one, Marcelo Garcia. I love the guard of Marcelo Garcia, but it's not a hugely practical one for someone who likes training for environments where striking would be allowed. If you're training for self-defense, you don't need a seated guard at all, basically. Because as soon as you get to seated, you should be standing up. But, Marcelo did so much great stuff from like a seated butterfly guard, and he could deal with giants from there. Which fight have you watched the most times from start to finish? Oh, that's between the Rumble in the Jungle and probably Machida versus Thiago Silva. I'll let you guess why. That was from Nick, by the way. Richard said, I missed this event, but it sounds like there was a lot of controversy. Looking forward to the article. No, it was shit. Like, the controversy was not even interesting controversy. Like, there's no reason to watch this if you haven't seen it already. Did you catch Lion Fight 34? No, I need to start watching Lion Fight. This was from Justin as well. I need to start watching Lion Fight because it's putting on tons of fights and a lot of good names too. I need a fight calendar, to be honest. I need to set myself up a fight calendar because I don't know what's going on any given day. I'll just look at what's happening at the weekend and go, well, that's what we're writing about then. It's because the fights come so fast and furious nowadays. It used to be like you'd be waiting a couple of weeks for a UFC event and going, oh yeah, or a Glory event or whatever. K1, sorry, back in the day. Aaron says, about the event, did you like the canvas? It was white and had logos. Yeah, that was probably the best part, yeah. Actually, the consensus online seems to be that the best part is Holly Holm's ass at 145 is much better than her ass at 135. Prashant said, thoughts on Holly giving away her attacks with key eyes? I don't think this had as much effect as her using the same old darting in a la Carlos Condit nonsense. No, it's the walking combinations that are costing her more than anything, and the complete absence of feints. Occasionally she'll feint with a key eye, but I don't know why she feels the need to key eye like that. None of the other fighters at Jackson's do that, it seems. And you can hear guys like Prince Nazim used to grunt when he was throwing his power punches. He'd be like, yeah, and you could hear that he was really going for it, but he didn't do it on every punch. Yeah, it's a bit Sharapova-esque. Adam says, thought the Boech-Jacare matchup was ridiculous, and now this Lobov-Swanson matchup. Oh, I forgot that was happening. Fuck. Also looks like a crap sandwich. Do you think the new UFC matchmaking is struggling, or have there always been turds in the blanket like this? No, this is really bad. Yeah. The Boech-Jacare thing seemed like they owed him a fight, and they've been putting him on the shelf for a while. I mean, I had a fighter talking to me the other day about like their last performance, and they were like, yeah, I don't think I did as well as I could have, and now I'm worried that they're going to keep me on the shelf for as long as possible. Because you got to remember, they got like 500 fighters under contract, and while we're constantly like, how do they main event all these cards? They've also got all these guys in the middle of the card where they just can't ignore them forever if they don't make a noise. So Jacare had to put up this fake Craigslist advert looking for an opponent, and then finally they said, please fight Tim Boech and submit him easily. Lobov versus Swanson is a bizarre fight to make. I thought Lobov looked the best he's ever looked against Ishihara. I thought Swanson is on the downward slope, even though he beat Superboy just the other month, whatever. But that is a strange matchup to make. I think the UFC's matchup department has really dropped the ball lately. I gave them a facetious tweet saying, could you just hand over the flyweight division to me for the next year or so, because I don't think you'll miss it. Number 5 ranked flyweight, they said at the start of the Wilson Hayes fight, could be looking at a title shot if he wins here. And you're like, he already had one, and he did nothing to lose it. And he's still on the undercard, and all these seats in the background are still empty. The more I look at it, the more it seems like the UFC lucks into its successful promotion. Right, I reckon that'll do us for today. If you've got pressing questions, shoot them in to fightsgoneby@gmail.com. And if I get a few, I might do another... I think I might take Friday to answer questions in podcast form. It just seems like a fun thing to do. Anyway, what's going on this weekend? Oh, God. Phaidor versus Mitrione. What more do you need to know? Phaidor's washed up. But Mitrione's been getting tagged by much lesser heavyweights, so could be interesting. But, Mitrione, proper heavyweight. Phaidor, always on the small side at heavyweight. The older he gets, the wilder he gets, and the less likely he is to survive the punches he takes. Basically, if you've been getting dropped by Fabio Maldonado, you're not really a top 10 heavyweight anymore, or even like top 20. Maybe he shocks him. Maybe we get a surprise return to form from Phaidor, but the grappling has just fallen away. All his training footage is of him boxing, and then when he gets in the ring, it's never the boxing, it's just swinging wild. I remember I was saying this before the Maldonado fight, and people still were like, "Oh, he's had a blip, blah blah blah." And he's like, "No, he's done. He's washed up." It's one of those ones I'd love to be wrong about, but 40 whatever it is now, and doing so badly against a fighter as mediocre as Maldonado, not a good sign. Second on that card, we got Josh Thompson versus Patricky Ferreira. That was made quite recently, a bit of a weird short notice one, but that could be a fun fight. Then you got Czech Congo versus Ollie Thompson. Ollie Thompson dropped Matt Mitrione. Czech Congo is a guy that they used to pad out UFC cards with and call a world-class striker. You remember. And then the rest of that card's pretty meh. I really wonder how much they're paying Phaidor here, because Strikeforce paid Phaidor way too much and then went under shortly afterwards. And Affliction did that too. No one should be paying Phaidor his asking price anymore for how badly he fights. And I can't imagine they're getting in that many viewers, because it's just a hardcore few who still believe that Phaidor's worth watching. And then on the UFC card this weekend, we've got Travis Browne versus Derek Lewis, which sounds like a fun enough fight. There was rumours about Travis Browne leaving Edmund, and then they were retracted or something like that. I hope he has, because the guy got by on having really good kicks and distancing, and those just disappeared when he went to Edmund. And then you've got Johnny Hendricks versus Hector Lombard in the co-main event. That's an interesting one, because Johnny Hendricks has been forced to go up to middleweight, where he will have a massive reach and height disadvantage against almost everyone he fights, because he's small for welterweight in terms of length. He's just, he's got girth. He's a wide dude. But Hector Lombard is also a really, really stocky middleweight who should probably be at welterweight. So it's a fight that really won't tell us much about what Johnny Hendricks can do against the standard middleweight, but it might be decent. Thiago Santos, blah, 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 blah. Sam Cecilia, you're breaking my heart. And then Paul Felder, jerking the curtain. God, how the mighty have fallen. And Sarah McMahon is still mid-card. Let's do a random recommendation then. Those of you who have read my Street Fighter articles will know that I enjoy a good game of Street Fighter from time to time. I did at one point get a review code for the UFC's game. In fact, one of the UFC games striking designers wrote to me and said he was basing some of it on some of the stuff that I put in Finding the Art, which I thought was really cool. But when the UFC EA Sports UFC 2 came out, I got a review code, and I promised Vice Gaming I'd do a review, and then I got so angry at fighting people online that I just didn't, and I haven't revisited the game since. But I don't play a lot of games because, I like to... I don't get enough free time, really. I like to do training in my free time, and then, if I can't, then I'll talk to my wife or something like that. But I was playing a game called Neo, which has just come out. And I used to play the old Dynasty Warriors. It must have been like Dynasty Warriors 1 back in the day. And that was always fun, button mashing. Apparently Namco owns a copyright for like the number of people on screen, which is why there are no other like army brawlers, where you take on armies of people. Don't know if that's true. Someone look that up for me. Is it Namco or Koei Tecmo? Someone like that. Anyway, they've now done this game that's like a Dark Souls game, and I quite enjoyed the Dark Souls games. I've only, I don't think I've completed any of them. I've been playing through Bloodborne because I'm a big fan of H.P. Lovecraft. Well, that gives you an indication of how often I get to play games. That came out in like 2015. But I was enjoying that, and I dropped that when someone said, try this Neo game, you'll love it. And it's interesting because it's not like a fighter game, but like that and Dark Souls, it's about recognizing patterns, and it's about moving certain ways. And it's always interesting because like you can move away from the swinging arm of the big monster, and that'll take, you can stay away from the big arm of the swinging monster, but it might not take you into a position where you're there to counter, or you can try and get under the swinging arm of the big monster, and you'll have more time behind him before he swings back at you with the other hand. It's an interesting series of games, and you should definitely check it out. But Neo's even better because they got like a 3-stance system, got all the fucking samurai weapons. If you like your old Kurosawa films, you'll love it. Well worth your time. Give it a go, and let me know how you get on with it. I'm only about 20 minutes in, but I'm loving it. Anyway, that'll do us for this week's podcast. If you send us some more questions, in fact, send us questions on anything, because like I like giving you random snippets into the films and shit I like too. But send us questions to fightsgonbypodcast@gmail.com, and I'll try and answer some more on Friday and then some more on the podcast next week. I've been your boy Jack Slack. This is Fights Gone By Podcast. Connor bless.